Batman Urban Legends issue 1, our new anthology book, all 70 pages of it. So this is 2 full-size stories and 2. I didn't count the pages, but they're about 10 each, I think. Just from the.
There's a lot. A lot of them feel longer than the others. Some of them feel shorter. So I'm sure there's differing page counts.
It was basically the first and last stories were the 20 pagers, and then the 2 in the middle were 10 each. Yeah. So the first one, and this is the thing. Obviously, it's the first issue, so I think we both read all of this, and going forward, issue 2, maybe we'd skip 1 or 2 if we didn't like 1 or 2 of the stories or whatever. But
yeah, so I definitely feel like some of them are going to be not every time. So like we know, like the Red Hood one, we know that's 6 issues worth, right?
Same with the Grifter one, which is 1 of 5.
And then the Grifter one as well. The 2 inside, I feel like they can shift. Like especially we'll talk about the Harley and Ivy one, but yeah. So I wasn't gonna read all of these, and then I started seeing what they were, and like I don't want another Red Hood story, but Zdarsky's been good, so I took a chance on it.
And it was really good, is what you're going to say.
It was. I hate it. Again, this goes into there's no such thing as bad characters.
Yes.
Right? Just bad takes. And, man, I don't like that they're making me like Jason. Between Tom Taylor and now Chip Zdarsky.
Tom Taylor, the Future State stuff, and now Chip Zdarsky. Because it's Chip Zdarsky.
And Williamson.
And let me just read so Chip Zdarsky's writing this. Eddie Barrows and Bear Ferreira are the artists. This is called Cheer, this Red Hood 6-part story. So Zdarsky, I've loved what I've read of his Daredevil, and there's definitely some shades of that in here. Now I wasn't necessarily in love with this story at first. It was like, okay, so Red Hood's tracking down some dude. There's some new drug on the streets of Gotham called Cheer Drops. And he's hunting it down. He's using rubber bullets because he knows that if he uses real bullets in Gotham, that Batman's going to commit. It's not that he's made a deal with Batman. He just knows that this will keep Batman off his back.
That's what I love the most, right? So, like, I like when Red Hood is, like, when he was first introduced by Judd Winnick, or reintroduced, you could say, he was kind of like DC's Punisher. But it was almost like to spite Batman. Like, he was like, oh, you failed me, so now I'm going to fail you. And I like here that it's more of a bother. Where he's like, yeah, I could just ice these dudes, but then I'm going to have Batman on my back, and I don't feel like it. So I do love that wrinkle, and I could feel that intent, and he didn't even have to say it, right? You just kind of get the vibe from it.
Yeah.
Man, Zdarsky, he was a good artist. He's really shaping into a really great writer.
Yeah, because obviously there's nothing special about the opening few pages, and then you get like a flashback to Jason being a little shit and not wanting to train and being kind of like obsessed with the gun closet that Batman has, which obviously he says, why do you have all these guns? He's like, well, because I have to understand how to disarm people. I have to understand how to do forensics on them. There's reasons for me to understand and know guns that isn't using them.
Well, and I don't think you mentioned it. The flashback is done. It's Marcus.
Yeah, different artist. Yeah,
is a different artist, and the art styles match perfectly, right? Like they complement each other well. Where you have Barrows, which is kind of a little bit darker and stuff, and the flashback, a lot more clean lines, and it's almost reminiscent of a simpler time.
Yeah, because it's meant to be harkening back to these earlier Jason Todd years.
Yeah.
And obviously Batman's investigating some of these. There's one of the guys on the drugs. Essentially, is at the edge of a roof, and the police try to talk him down.
Yeah. So you find out that the drug is a spinoff of almost of the fear gas, except it does the opposite, where it kind of makes you all
too happy,
almost kind of like like Black Mercy, right? Where it kind of gives you what you want to see, but it makes you hallucinate, and it can put you into some real bad situations. And that's where we see Batman save this dude who kind of swan dives off the top of a building.
Yeah, it was because obviously Jason says this. He says that people are getting into like trouble because they're walking onto the road or they're getting into dangerous. But then we get this example of it with Batman, and it does a really good job of like establishing that this is in again the current day Gotham. Oracle, is in this as well, where Jason calls Oracle for help with the situation that pops up. Where this actually got good, because it wasn't bad up to this point. It was perfectly fine.
No.
But where it kind of started to, obviously I loved Oracle being a part of it and talking to both Red Hood and Bruce. Where it got its heart And where I went, Zarski, you son of a bitch, you're making me like this story enough that I have to read more of it, is when Jason comes across this kid, when he's tracking down where these drugs are coming from, and this little boy, his mother's OD'd on the drug. And it wasn't even this point yet. I mean, this works, don't get me wrong, it works because his own mum OD'd, so he's being nice to this kid, he's looking after him, he's asking Oracle to track down the father, but the father's one of the people who are involved in making the drug, or at least distributing the drug. And he goes looking for him, and there's a scene where they're in the alleyway, and he gives because obviously the mouth part of his mask comes off and he's just got the eye part, and he gives the kid the mouth part. He's like, hey, now you're a superhero too, so I need you to be a superhero and stay here. And he's like, can I pick my own superhero name? And he's like, yeah, you can, of course you can. He's like, and by the way, if anything goes wrong, if anything comes up, just say Oracle, I need help, right? Because obviously his communicator's in his mask. And he's like, cool, so you're going to be good? And he's like, yeah, so what's your superhero name? And he's like, well, what's yours? And he's like, I'm the Red Hood. And he goes, well, I'm the Blue Hood then. I like blue. And I'm like, do you know what? I hate how much, and because I think it's the art as well, because like Jason's like sort of smile, he's almost tearing up as he's looking down. I'm in the pouring rain. He's looking down at this kid. I'm like, oh god, you're making me like Jason, like someone like Joel from The Last of Us, or like any kind of anti-hero character who becomes kind of a begrudging father figure. Like, I'm like, no, Zarski, no, don't make me like Jason, you prick.
This is not typical of a Jason story, right? This is something that I might see out of Dick Grayson, right? So he's in, picks up the kid, but we know from his history, like, that's not outside the realm. But with Jason, it's kind of like, oh yeah, of course he would try to shelter this kid because this is him.
And just the idea that this kid is looking up, and even though he doesn't really know who he is before, that very quickly he's idolizing him. So to this kid, he's becoming the Batman to this kid. So this kid's like, I want to be Blue Hood. I want to be your sidekick. I want to be something that is inspired by you. So that this reaction from Jason feels very genuine. And I'm like, damn, because it was this point in the book where this moment happens where I'm like, shit, this is actually really good. This isn't just fine, because up until this point it was perfectly fine and I was enjoying it well enough. Yeah. But this was the point where I'm like, damn it, this is actually really good. For
me, it's when he gave the mask to the kid and said, if you get into trouble, just say Oracle, I need help. And it's just like he's giving the kid like agency in this, right? Like,
yeah, and the art is really, like when the next page when he's looking up at the building and the lightning striking above, it's just the art is pretty gorgeous. Honestly, that's Eddie Barrow's art is really good. Yeah. And he goes in and he fights everyone, and he actually chases down the dad who runs. He hits him with the rubber bullet. The guy drops his gun, which is important. Because when the dad says, "Oh, I don't care if that kid lives or dies," he was a little leech. So was his mother. Sometimes I'd give him the drug just to keep him happy and off my back. And Jason, that's what makes Jason so angry at the end of this story, is that he picks up his gun, which is obviously using real bullets, and shoots him multiple times in the chest. And he does have a moment, of course, where he's like, "Oh God, what have I just done?" But the idea that we're ending this story with Jason going back to killing someone because he's upset him that much, because this guy's a turd. This guy's so vile.
Yeah, no one's gonna miss him. But
it's the idea of, okay, because we kind of glossed over that Batman has a conversation with Oracle in the middle of the issue that he's not happy that Jason's investigating this because Jason's a killer and I'm not really excited about working with him. But and the fact that we even end this issue, the panel of Jason on his knees next to this dead body, I can't help but notice that it's in an alleyway, it's raining, and it's very reminiscent of the Wayne murders. The way he's sitting there, he's effectively just Joe Chilled, this guy's dad. Even though, sure, we know that this kid's parents were shitty, and he's arguably better off without them in a lot of ways, but.
Yeah, but you don't get the vibe that the kid thinks the dad's a bad dad.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Right? Because he's just like, oh, I know where my dad works. And yeah, so and then to see what the dad says, and you're just like, oh man. Yeah. So, and then when he says that he gave him the thing just to keep him out of his hair. I don't know, this dude's gotta be dropped off a roof.
Yeah. This was the perfect type of story to tell with Jason, and then it makes him sympathetic. But he does go that one step further, which is both cathartic for us because we completely sympathize with why he does this, but also because it is Batman's world and we know that killing's over this line, and he feels that he's done that immediately. So this is the perfect kind of what's Batman going to do when he finds out about this? You imagine there's protecting this kid's going to be a big part of this arc. I hate how good this was.
Yeah, I know. Damn it, Zdarsky.
Oh,
how dare you?
Zdarsky, you son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. It's really funny right now that Taylor's going to be on Nightwing, Red Hood's getting good stories, Damien's got a new book by Williamson.
No.
Just Tim's
But after all these years of like we had King on Batman and kind of like everything kind of had to stem from that, and like Batgirl was kind of inconsistent and Nightwing was fine up until they made that really bad decision. Tim wasn't kind of anywhere to be found. I'm enjoying the fact that Gotham feels like it's all taking place in the same spot. Yes. Like this very much feels like, not just because Oracle's there, but there is some consistency finally to that neck. And I don't know if that's editorial. I don't know if that's just, Tynan setting things up right in his book or whatever it is.
I just wonder, I wonder if under the old regime there was too many blocks for things that stopped a lot of coherent collaboration between books and editorial teams and whatever. Because we heard a lot of horror stories of I think it was Mercad Scott who wasn't invited to the Bat Family meeting of writers. Like, wait, she's writing Batgirl, why is she not at that meeting, like talking about keeping everything in sync with each other? I don't know.
Right. And so like, and this is where like this is the type of continuity that I like. Like, you don't have to read everything, right? But the fact like Oracle's popping up here and then she's filling the same role she did last week in Batman, where she feels like she's part of this.
It feels like a breathing world. Yeah. And it's not a thing where even if you only read the books that you think are good enough for you to read, the fact that there's still going to be some stuff sprinkled in it, you don't feel bad that you've missed some sprinklings in other books, but if you do read them and you do like them, you're going to be excited by the fact that everything is feeling like a part of a living, breathing world that all links and connects and whatnot. But no, I think this tying into Jason's unsheltered trauma, him being sympathetic with this kid, the ending being the perfect kind of he's went too far. But we're bizarrely, this puts us in a place where when Batman comes after him for doing this, we're kind of going to be rooting for him to like sort of prove to Batman that, like, okay, Killian's wrong, sure, but like maybe let's not overreact here, or I don't know. But anyway,
right. He fell and the gun went off.
And Batman knows he's tracking down this drug, so he's already got. So even if he comes to this crime scene, there's going to be a connection with Jason before he's even started looking at anything. So a lot going on there. What are you rating this story?
I'm giving this an 8.5.
Yeah, I have to agree with 8.5, which is notably the highest thing I've rated so far this week, which is shocking. Shocking. Zdarsky, you son of a bitch. Get Zdarsky on a full-time DC contract, please. If he can do this for Red Hood, he can do wonders for anyone.
He also did a Jimmy story that was really good too. So like, it's not just the dark kind of Daredevil-y things like you said, but there was that Jimmy Olsen story was real good too.
Yeah. All right. So the next story was the Harley and Ivy story, which was Harley remembering their first sort of date and time together, stealing stuff from the Iceberg Lounge, bonding over plants, and she's back in their lair in present day though, being kind of miserable that Ivy's gone and looking at the old photos and basically missing her, and that's kind of it. So that's basically the whole thing. But you do get to see them flirt, and you get to see them kiss and say I love you for the first time. It's basically a romance.
Yeah, and just the whole idea, like the plant represented their relationship, and like she finds it again later, and they're different people now, but like it can still be nursed back. Like there's still that promise of it'll be okay. And like the Laura Braga art is just, I think it fits really well with this small story. And then the reason I want to talk about
hold on a second, just Stephanie Phillips is also writing it, just since you mentioned the artist.
That's what I was going to say. Stephanie Phillips doing Harley, and yet I see the ad for the art in Harley, and like I really like this story. I thought the voice for Harley it's where I enjoy Harley, and then I look over and this kind of makes me upset because I think I would enjoy Stephanie Phillips Harley, but I'm not going to read it because the art, you know. So
I had a bit of a stupid moment at the end of this because I got to it says to be continued in the pages of Harley Quinn and Batman,
yeah,
and I went, they've not announced a Harley Quinn and Batman book.
yeah, yeah. And since I caught up in Catwoman, I kind of know what Ivy's going to be up to.
Sure,
you know.
yeah.
So talking about that sense of a linked world, there's that at play as well. And we saw Harley last week in Batman.
I mean,
Harley's keep up, jumping on the rooftops.
Harley's been a staple in Batman for a while, and I've been enjoying her inclusion in Batman for the most part. So that's cool. So this is just a one and done. So this will have a different. This will be replaced next time with another 10-page story
by something else.
Yeah.
But no, I really enjoyed the story. It was a nice, simple, just kind of Harley reminiscing, and nice imagery. So yeah.
What are you giving it?
I'm gonna give this a 7.5.
Yeah. I don't know what to give that, because I thought it was perfectly fine. I'm not maybe as invested into the Harley Ivy relationship as other people are, but there's certainly nothing wrong with it. I'll just go with a straight 7. It was just good. I have no passion for it, but I have nothing to really complain about. So 7 out of 10 is kind of where I fall on that. Next story is the first part of a 3-part Outsider story. And Black Lightning is trapped somewhere in a tower, but he's talking to Metamorpho as if Metamorpho's in another cell, which is notable because the reveal at the end of the story, of course, is that the entire tower is Metamorpho, which is a neat twist, I think.
This is not my Outsiders I tend to enjoy. Like, yeah, these are the characters. But this was just like, I don't know. It felt weird.
You went into this? You enjoy this one?
I don't say I didn't enjoy it. I'm gonna finish reading the story, but I guess I'm just so used to the Outsiders that we've been getting. That was that, Brian Hill, ruggedness. This definitely feels like the Outsiders from the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, they're fighting ninjas on jet skis, right, and boats.
They are. That's when we flash back to the afternoon. We get them on jet skis. And there's some good action here, Lightning's like stopping like poisonous arrows. At one point, Katana does it as well with her blade, and it's all just kind of fighting. Metamorpho's coming after them. It sounds like Katana gets taken off to like fight an army by herself. And the end of the story is Jefferson saying, "Hey, are you ready to regain control?" And he sort of blasts lightning through the building to wake up Metamorpho.
Right.
So the final page is this full-page spread of like the building with a mouth and eyes kind of screaming as the lightning's coming through it. He's like, "Wake up!" So we can give them payback. So just for the record, this is Brandon Thomas writing with Max Dunbar on the art.
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. I don't want to kill it for not being what I was expecting for Outsiders, because I was not expecting Metamorpho building and Black Lightning trapped inside. In a prison fashion. So I'm gonna check it back out, but it was just it was weird. Was not expecting this type of story for Outsiders.
I mean, it's still Katana and Black Lightning, which has kind of been the core thing. Certainly in the Future State story it was. So it felt like a slightly different thing, but it didn't feel that different to me. Obviously, the art and the action was so good in that Future State story that yes, this doesn't quite live up to that. I mean, I'll concede that. I mean, this is. But yeah, I think it was perfectly fine. I thought that final page was a lot of fun, and so I'm curious to see what the actual conflict is, because it kind of holds it back for now. So we'll see. But again, it's one of these weird things where it's hard to judge a 10-page story when it's part 1 of 3, because it's like how much. This is why talking about the digital books is so tough when they only do the 10. Which is why we're waiting for the full physical issues worth before we're talking about it.
Yeah.
What are you rating this?
I'll give this a 7. I think it's fine.
I'll also give it a 7. If I come out of these 10-page stories with 7s, I'm fairly happy enough. It's when they start to dip lower into the more, this was a chore to read territory. So the final story in the book is the Grifter story, which starts with a flashback to him during this big fight in Midway City, where his brother's also there, and they're in this losing battle. People are dying around them. Eventually, the superheroes show up, and we see all these wishing lines go past, and like, oh, finally, like we're saved. But it comes to present day, and he's hired as a bodyguard for Lucius Fox. And it starts off with, would you believe it, Grifter messing up because he sees two guys get out of a car, and he thinks, oh, these two look suspicious, so I'm going to take them on. And he gets into a fight, and it turns out that these are actually just more bodyguards for the guy that Lucius is meeting. They just didn't come in the helicopter with him.
Yeah. Who's the prime minister of a country, right? Or a foreign minister of some kind, and then Grifter tackles him into the pool.
Kurlenko is the name of the minister, Prime Minister Kurlenko. I can't say that properly.
There you go.
But there's a joke here where he's like, "Hey, you know, if I messed up this deal, dock my pay for the losses." And Lucius is like, "It was $1.3 billion."
Yeah,
you're right.
Okay, maybe.
You're right. Speaking of things messing up. Yeah, but he spits out his drink. It's a glorious moment. So we'll start a payment plan.
You start a payment plan. That's what I was trying to say when my mic went rogue. I'll say this: Rosenberg has I don't like Grifter as a character. Right? He hasn't won me over yet. However, the dialogue that he has with anytime him and Lucius are together, because they're such an odd couple, it's spot on. And maybe over the course of these 6 issues of the story, he'll win me over. But through what was he in Dark Detective? For 2 issues of that.
That was, yeah.
And this, so far not so much, but I did get a good laugh out of that, and just
I also
just his total vibe.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic case of like, I think we're enjoying this because of the writer's voice rather than because the character's someone that we latch onto.
Yeah.
And if it's still the case at the end that that's how we feel, then that's fine. But she also mentioned that he's talking to someone on comms earlier on. When he's going to tackle the guards, there's someone making fun of him over the comms, talking about how no ladies want to be with him, and he's the best at what he does, except Deathstroke and Shiva, and lists a few other assassins.
Yeah. Cheshire.
I got a chuckle out of that.
Yeah.
We don't actually get a reveal for who he's talking to by the end of the issue, but it's obviously an ongoing mystery. But we do get him going to see Penguin. There's a funny little page where the guards like disarming him, and he's got like a bunch of different like tiny weapons, including a grenade on him, and he's kind of reacting as the guards getting more and more annoyed at him. But Nora Freeze is at this meeting.
Weird.
Yeah, I think we heard a while ago that she was going to be around. Like she was up and she was going to be a feature of some kind. But they have whatever meeting they have. We don't really get to see the ending of it, but I mean, the voice on the comms is definitely it's not definitely a woman necessarily, but I don't think Grifter's bisexual or gay or whatever. So I assume it's a woman because they say they're horny when they're asking Grifter to come over. But Batman comes up for a fight. The one thing I do kind of dig about Grifter so far in Rosenberg's voice is the idea that he's kind of a screw up, and as he's fighting Batman, he keeps thinking he's got the upper hand, but he keeps just getting the shit beat out of him, and it's kind of amusing.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of Clint Barton.
A little tiny bit. He's kind of that screw up lead character who keeps thinking he's in over his head, but he does actually steal a badge when he's there to protect Lucius Fox. He sort of he gets told to take the afternoon off because he's been useless. What a shock. And he's going to snoop around in the private computers, and then the end of the issue is Batman and Nightwing have been called to a crime scene where the body of Nora Freeze is in the water. Which, first of all, Mr. Freeze is not going to be delighted when he hears about this. See,
not at all.
Especially, wasn't Mr. Freeze one of the guys in that opening battle scene firing off his freeze gun? I feel like I remember that being a thing. I will say this ending was like so out of nowhere. I was like, wait, this is going to be a murder mystery about who killed Nora Freeze? What now?
Maybe.
I was not expecting that. But I'm curious. They've got me curious. That's snooping.
I'm looking for Freeze. Yeah, he's in there.
I thought I saw him.
Years ago. So
curious.
But yeah.
Curious. She was kept alive in a tank for so long. She's been murdered, seemingly. I mean, and of course we never saw the ending of that meeting with Penguin, so we don't know. How how that ended. It didn't seem like he just murdered someone when he walked out of it, but you know, yeah, it just kind of ends in it ends in a cliffhanger, where Penguin brings up the name Merlot and Drifter grabs a gun from one of the guards or from Penguin himself, whoever it is, and it ends in a kind of a standoff, and then it just cuts to him sort of leaving the building. So we don't actually know, and obviously I think that's intentionally vague so that we think, oh, maybe he did murder Nora Freeze. Obviously, I don't think he actually did, but
well, I'm trying to look up how she came back to life.
It didn't
to see if maybe this is just a red herring.
Well, that's the thing. This didn't surprise me. This definitely came up at some point. I don't know if it was in a book that we read or it was just in the news that Nora Freeze was like up and around, but it definitely came up.
So it says in the Rebirth, it says Nora from New 52 had been retconned, so they got rid of that whole thing where they weren't actually married. He was just obsessive. It was similar to the animated series. She was a talented ballerina, discovered she had an incurable disease. So several years later, after the events of Year of the Villain, Luther gives Mr. Freeze a vial that would cure her and furthermore revive his frozen wife. Mr. Freeze had kidnapped several women, modifying their DNA to hers in order to experiment with the vial. And wasn't that the story with Bruce, where he ended up in the
court?
The
trial, he was in the trial. Yeah,
right.
It was
That's what
12 Angry Men starring Batman. Yes.
Right, and it says in the end it worked, and his wife came back. She soon took up the name of Mrs. Freeze.
Yeah, it didn't surprise me when we saw her. I was like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten she was up and around there, but it didn't surprise me.
Right, Detective 1014.
Yeah,
is where that happened. That was Tomasi. So
we probably didn't read the actual issue, but I remember hearing it because it didn't. Yeah, because when I saw her, I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about this," but I didn't. It didn't shock me. I wasn't like, "Whoa, Nora Freeze is up and around."
Right.
Like it wasn't that. So I knew it was something that it happened. But yeah, okay, it was in Detective, which obviously we all dropped after that.
Right.
That first arc kind of fumbled and died. I'm excited to read Detective actually when it's out in a week or two, whatever it is. So, yeah. I mean, how did you feel about this Grifter story?
It's okay. Again, it's a lot on the voice of Rosenberg. I'm gonna check out the next one. So I'm not like Cole Cash is. It's almost the opposite of Yara Flor, where I'm like, yeah, give me all the Yara Flor I can get. Grifter, I'm kind of like, okay, it's Grifter. This could have been almost a Deathstroke story too. It'd
be a very different voice, but yeah, I mean, it could have been.
Yeah. But what I mean is, it's very similar to that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll see. I'm gonna keep checking it out though. They have me on this book that I didn't want to read, but by the strength of the stories.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We have like a legitimately surprisingly good story with Red Hood. We have this, which I think is also very solid, and because the voice is so strong, it's got the interesting murder mystery angle, and it's filling out more kind of Gotham-y stuff because it does still involve Batman a little bit, still involving Nightwing apparently by the end, a little touch. Oracle's popping up in some of the stories, being the voice and help over the comms, and you got the middle stories. It's really easy to be like, no, I'm going to keep reading this because it's at the end of an anthology where I'm already sold. If not in one of them being really good, so I'm going to have it anyway. But the idea that collectively they're worth reading because they're together. I don't think anything in this first issue was a dud. Maybe you weren't necessarily in love with everything, but I don't think anything was like a detractor to it.
No.
What were you rating this issue or this story?
Oh, this story? I'm gonna give this story an. I did like the art. The art's pretty good. I'll give this a 7.5, 8. I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it an 8. I think the voice that that Rosenberg has here. I think it's actually kind of funny that this book starts with Zdarsky and ends with Rosenberg because there were two writers that I kind of discovered in Marvel that are now doing DC work in some capacity. But I did appreciate that. In fact, I think I don't think it was, maybe it was in a Punchline, but someone mentioned Snyder University. I think it was Punchline. Yeah. I was like, oh man, is that maybe a bit too soon to have Snyder be one of the names that we use for stuff?
Yeah. Well,
but
as long as it's Scott, not the other one, we're good.
Next week, Matt. Next week. Prepare yourself. Prepare yourself.
So one of the times I envy Connor because I'll have to be sober.
Yes. I gotta give that an 8 anyway. So, book as a whole, Urban Legends, I mean, I would say it was a fairly successful first issue. Proof of concept of like, hey, here's a collection of Gotham-related things going on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose technically the Outsider story was taking place nowhere near Gotham. It was in Japan, but...
Yeah, but they're all Gotham-centric, So, sure. Close enough, right?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, Jefferson isn't really... Katana, I wouldn't say is really. Metamorpho, I wouldn't say is really. Well, in fact, I would say that none of them. I mean, if Cass was there, or if Duke was there.
Yeah. Close enough.
So what are we giving the book as a whole then?
I'll give the full book a 7.5. There's too much math, so I'm just gonna go with off my gut.
Let me see. I think I overall have to go. I have to go with an 8 overall. I think ultimately that first story was really good, and then everything else didn't really detract from it. If not was enjoyable. This Grifter story being kind of the second one in terms of quality, and then the two middle stories being solid enough. So
yeah, doing the math, if I remembered what I gave all the ratings to, it ends up averaging at 7.75. 7.5 is close enough.
Don't worry about the math. It's not about math, Matt. It's not about math.